Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 8 of Just Jenni Lee, my little video series in which I work on a boring part of a painting while talking about not necessarily art-related things, stuff in my life, whatever, stuff I'm thinking about. So today I actually thought I would tell you the story of my birthday boots. If you watched the other videos, you will get to hear a little bit about my past and my childhood and how we were like really poor, didn't have a lot of resources. And so my birthday's coming up. I'm going to be 50 on February 9th, which is really exciting. But I remember when I was turning 9 on February 9th, what do they call that? Your golden birthday or whatever. I had something happen that was really memorable and I haven't ever forgotten. And I actually just thought it'd be kind of fun to tell the story and work on some of these redundant line work because I still need to do coat 2 on a good chunk of the painting. So let's get into it. So like I was saying, when we were kids, we just didn't have a lot of resources. My parents were very poor, just a lot going on at that time in our life. My dad had gotten out of the Navy and we had kind of struggled financially after that point. He really had a poor transition, I guess, into like civilian work. And so we had a couple of even rougher than normal years once that happened. And we were going to, like I said in the last video, when I was a kid, my parents' faith became like really important to them. They kind of went from not having any faith and just doing whatever they wanted. And they were both really, really into drugs and alcohol. My dad had a really bad pornography addiction. In fact, I hate to even mention this, but it's just one of my memories. And I have so few from my childhood because of a lot of other things that happened, but and trauma and stuff. But I remember as a kid, my parents had a waterbed and I really loved that waterbed. And my dad, like I said, was out, he was in the Navy, so he was out to sea a lot. And so it was a special treat for us. There wasn't like co-sleeping back in those days. That would have been considered maybe not a great idea. So you didn't ever stay in your parents' bed. So anyways, it was like the most fun thing in the world if you got to like sleep in the waterbed for the night if my dad wasn't there, and he would be gone for 6 months at a shot. And even then my mom still wouldn't have us like in her bed. So anyways, interesting though, I remember sleeping in that bed or lying on it. Sometimes my brothers and I would play on it, which we weren't really supposed to do, but it was one of the old fashioned bladder water beds where it was like not in a mattress. It was like a big vinyl balloon and it literally was like, woo. So we would love to jump on it and stuff, but you could pop it, so you had to be careful. So anyways, and my dad was really young, in fact, when I was born. So I'm going to give him a little bit of that too. Like he was in his early 20s when I'm having these memories, but he was like so into that whole thing that he had taken the old school magazines that you could buy. Are you allowed to say that on here? I don't even know, but you could go into like the back corner of the whatever bookstore and they would be back there. And he would like rip out all the pages or cut them out or whatever and like paste them all on this. He would like tape them all on the ceiling or whatever. And I was always like a little bit confused by that. I didn't really understand what I was looking at. I was actually that young. I just, kind of saw pictures of all these ladies all over the ceiling. So anyways, after we moved to New York State, my parents had quite a transformation, and they really kind of pretty overnight ended all that, ended all the drinking, ended all the drugs, all that stuff. It just ceased, and they started going to church. Now, the funny thing is I had started going to church actually by myself prior to this. We lived in Washington State before we lived in New York. And so when I was about 5 years old, there was like a bus that would come around and pick up the kids from the Navy housing. And my mom would send me and I would go by myself every Sunday morning to church. And I really loved going. The people there were so nice, and she would give me like 50 cents and I would put in the offering plate. Now I know it sounds crazy to send your 5-year-old, but like, again, different times. We're talking the very early 80s. So I was very familiar with church at that point, and I was excited that my whole family would go and I wouldn't have to go by myself anymore. And my parents had quite the transformation at that point. So anyways, I kind of forgot where I was going with that, but I was just telling you a story about my dad being really young, actually. So in reality, he got out of the Navy after we had been in New York for a couple of years. The schedule was incredibly challenging, and, there were maybe other better offers that he thought the military background would help him with. In reality, he ended up struggling for a good bit to kind of reacclimate to the civilian world. Once he found a spot, he did well, but it took him some time, and it wasn't like the first job ended up being the best one for him. And so we, our faith became really important to us, and the church we went to had this little tiny new private Christian school in the basement. Now, it wasn't actually run by the church. It was run by a different church, maybe a couple churches together. And our church was, peripheral involved, but they had a big, huge facility that was unusual back in the 80s. That wasn't really a thing. Churches were pretty small. And so, I'm not saying there weren't big cathedrals and stuff, but, most like Christian type churches just aren't like that. So anyways, it had a big basement. It had all these rooms that could be classrooms. It had like kind of like an area where you could eat lunch and have a little indoor gym area and all this. And so the school basically rented the space from them. And when we started going to that church, my parents felt really strongly that it would be a good idea for us to go to the school. I started there in 3rd grade, and then I had a brother start there. My one brother, 2 years younger than me, went into 1st grade, and the other one, I think, went into kindergarten, something to that effect. So in any case, we were going to the school, but we really couldn't afford to go. It was expensive then. And in fact, I sent my own daughter there many years down the road. It was called Spa Christian School. They're no longer a thing. But I sent my own daughter there, and it was like $600 a month in the early 2000s. So it was not really, accessible unless you had some kind of income. So the school and the church kind of collaborated, and they felt bad for my parents, and they gave us like a discount on the tuition for helping to clean the church. And so for me, my job basically after school got done was to, get on my hands and knees right out of the starting gate and get the papers and the stuff. And we would just kind of start leaning through the classroom to clean up the stuff. And my brothers and I practically lived at this church, I felt like, for years. And maybe that was over excessive, and, that's a whole nother story. But in any case, we were there quite a lot. And so I would, start cleaning up the classroom basically every day. And the fact that my parents were the custodians of the space and we cleaned up the building was really the only reason why we were even able to go there for 2 years. And after 2 years, it was actually just too much for my parents, and we couldn't keep going, and we went back to public school. So I remember the first year that I was there, I had what I felt like were kind of terrifying experiences in school. When we moved from Washington State to New York State, it was a challenging situation. In Washington State, they were in the middle of me skipping from 1st grade to 3rd grade, and I was basically taking both at the same time, or both 1st grade and 2nd grade. I forget exactly, but I was going into 3rd grade the next year. And when I got to New York State, they put me in 2nd grade, and all of the curriculum was really different, and there were different things that I didn't know, and there were different things I did know that they didn't know, and the teacher was just super angry and irate at me every day. I will never forget her. Her name was Mrs. Moore, and I'm going to say her name because for years there were so many girls that I met in the area that had her for a teacher. She taught for years, decades, and she was miserable, and it made little girls especially cry and hate going to school. And there was no reason for it because I loved school up to that point. It had been a dream for me. I would skip off to school every day and I was the happiest person in the world. And after I kind of got healed from the trauma of moving and all that happening to me and being so supported, and then it took me a little bit of time in getting out of that school system for them to discover, oh gosh, she's really naturally gifted and has just been kind of abused by, certain individuals. So anyways, I was traumatized and my parents couldn't stand it. They saw me go from an outgoing, happy-go-lucky, amazing kid that was like skipping grades to having the school system basically gaslight them and bully them. And so of course, they start going to this church, and the church people there all hear about it and they're mortified, and they try to work out a way for us to go to this school so that I can, be in a better situation, essentially. And my brothers also, both of them, ironically, learning disabled and getting kind of thrown under the bus for that. So it was like they didn't want to acknowledge that I had maybe some kind of giftings, and they also didn't want to acknowledge my brothers were had some learning disabilities. So it was a struggle. It was a real struggle for my parents. And so they were only all too excited to get us into this private school as much as we could be there for. So we didn't have any money though. That was even the discount on the tuition was really challenging financially for my parents. And we oftentimes didn't have what we needed. There was a dress code there, and there were lots of times when I had to choose between like dress shoes or sneakers, but you had to have sneakers for gym class. And I didn't have any. I had a pair of flats that my friend I mentioned the other day had given me, and it was bitter cold, and I have like residual frostbite on my feet from like having to transfer buses and wait like 45 minutes on 10-degree weather in just ballet flats basically for the next bus. And so I would have these long mornings, and I would come to school and I would be crying because my feet would hurt so bad. And I still have all kinds of issues because of it. And it when I had gym class, I would get like marked, like not prepared. And so I started wearing my brother's sneakers. Now, mind you, my one brother was 2 years younger than me and the other one was 4. And the shoes were too small. And she would make us run around the gym and my feet would hurt so bad that I would have tears streaming down my face. But I thought, well, at least you can't say I'm not prepared. And people knew that was the situation. So back in the mid 80s, there was a style of boot that was really popular with the girls. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it had like the rubber top sort of with like the lines, and then it had like a quilted part for your ankle and lower calf, and then it had like the sheep sort of stuff on the top, and then that went down inside the boot. And all of my friends had them, and my friend who gave me the other clothes, Julie, who gave me the clothes and the bike and the ballet flats and all that, she had a pair, but she hadn't like had a pair long enough to outgrow having a pair to give me a pair, if that makes any sense. And her feet were actually much bigger than mine. So it was rare that I could really get her shoes unless like she had them a couple years ago, and she really didn't. So I had tiny feet. And so that whole year of going into the 3rd grade there, I had this amazing teacher who I thought was beautiful and kind, and she would bring her guitar and she would play songs for us, and she had just a warmth to her that was so wonderful. Her name was Mrs. Bunting, and she had just gotten married. I think she was like 25 years old. They took us, in fact, like up to their cottage on Lake George, and they let us all swim in the little alcove and everything. I just thought she was the most amazing person on the planet. So anyways, I remember that my birthday was coming up and I really wanted those boots. That's all I really wanted. I didn't want like toys. I didn't want like money. I wanted a pair of those boots. My feet were killing me every day, and everybody had them. I just wanted them. I thought they were beautiful. And my parents were like, yeah, honey, I don't think we are going to be able to get those for you. And I had like basically just given up on the idea of getting them. Now, my mom is a lefty, And the interesting thing about that is most lefties have really crappy handwriting. That's just kind of the way that they write. So if I look like I'm a lefty in this, it's because, or anytime I'm working, it's because I just don't flip the camera the other way around. I'm a righty. But my mom is a lefty, but she had beautiful handwriting. I don't know how. She says it was because she went to Catholic school and the nuns would like rap on her fingers with rulers. So she learned how to write beautiful. She has way prettier handwriting than I'll ever have. And so I knew what my name looked like in cursive, in Jennifer, in her handwriting. So that's important because I go to school on my 9th birthday on February 9th, and there had been like this, you know how churches have pews? Well, sometimes they have short ones for like certain things, and there was one that was probably like a 3 or 4 seater, but it had to be seated outside of our classroom for whatever reason. And like a lot of times kids would throw their coats on there or whatever. So I get to school, and I remember that day I'm almost like the last one there for some reason. I don't remember what happened, but we had to do this whole bus transferring thing, and oftentimes got us there like just on time, barely. So I'm like the last person arriving, and I remember that. I was like rushing to put my coat on the hook. We had like these old school wooden coat rack with the hooks, and you had like your slot, you know. And as I'm walking into the classroom, off to the right, I see on the pew, there's really nothing on there, but there's this beautifully wrapped shoebox size package. And on the wrapping paper is scrawled in cursive that looks like my mother's cursive, Jennifer. So I'm like, huh? So my teachers, there's only 6 kids in my class, by the way. That's how tiny it was. So my teacher sounded kind of standing in the doorway, and I said, huh? I was like, what is this? She's like, it looks like it's for you. And I said, did my mom bring it? And she's like, I don't know. I said, I think that's her handwriting. And she's like, maybe. And I opened the box, and there were the beautiful navy blue winter boots. Mind you, it's February 9th. Now it's February 2nd today. And it's just as winter as ever. And if I got a new pair of boots and I didn't have them, I'd probably be still grateful. But mind you, we've had 2 months of like living hell up here. It's been just zero kind of since the 1st of December, and it's been relentless, which is kind of unusual. But there's a lot of winter that's already happened. And we're already looking for, okay, it's not going to be freezing in March. It may be freezing all of February, but it's not going to be freezing until March. So, you know, by the time I hit my birthday, I start thinking like into, you know, spring is, the light is at the end of the tunnel, right? And so I took those boots, I put them on my feet, and I was convinced that my mom had got them for me. She had told me, no, I don't think so. Well, I was so excited. I was even telling my classmates, like, I think my mom bought them. I think she got them. I think she brought them and surprised me. Now, my mom isn't one of those kinds of people that does that kind of thing. She just isn't. My family's very old school. We didn't do all these special, spectacular spectacles that you see nowadays. That was not a thing back then. So that would have been like amazing for her just to bring it. And she was like, you know, going to college again for nursing. And so that would have been even amazing that she would have even figured out how to do it or had the time. So anyways, I go home and I burst in with, you know, my boots at the end of the day. Well, I was a latchkey kid. You have to look that up. So nobody was there. But when people got home, I obviously was like really grateful for the boots. Oh my gosh, thank you. You got me the boots. And my mom said, we didn't get those for you. And I said, what? Yes, you did. Like it was your handwriting. And she's like, no, honey, we didn't have the money, and we meant it. You know, our birthday sometimes had no gifts. If we had a box cake mix that I would decorate and frost and most of the time cook, I don't think I did that year, but I had cooked many of my own birthday cakes once I was a little older. No, I knew she was serious. And I said, but who then? And she said, well, maybe your teacher. And I said, what? No, that wouldn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand it. I never heard of a teacher being that nice. And come to find out, it was her. It was her. And I'll tell you what, that was the moment that I really shifted in my mindset about what it looks like to be a blessing to somebody without rubbing their nose in it, without them needing to see you do it. I think we're like overwhelmed in a world of everybody needs to see everybody doing stuff. You need to know that you're supporting this, that, or the other thing. I'm not criticizing anybody from any one thing. So if you want to think that, that's on you. I am not. I think that's across the board, no matter what culture you find yourself within. I do know one thing. I know that the Bible says that the right hand doesn't need to know what the left hand is doing. And that's not saying you need to be devious. That's saying that good that is done when no one is observing it is far more intrinsically valuable than good that is done with everybody watching. And there's been a lot of times in my life where I have done good things for people, and maybe even now to this day they don't know it was me, and I don't care, because I think that there's a lot more value in making the determination to be good within your own self, your own heart, and your own mind than to make sure that the world knows that that's what you're doing, because I think it will just exude out of you. You don't have to prove any points. You don't have to make your case. So I've probably rambled on long enough. I didn't even have a sip of my tea since I started talking, and I should probably do that. But if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you. I think you're fantastic. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you like this content and you haven't subscribed, I'd love to have you along for my journey. If you're an artist or a creative in any way, let's be friends. I want to support you. And I just think the world of anybody who is working in their own way to make a difference without having to use a bullhorn to proclaim it to the world. So you're valued, even if you think nobody sees you. I see you because I know there are others out there like me. So I hope you have a fantastic day and a fantastic rest of the week, and I will catch you in the next video.